Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. If you're a sports fan, you've spent many games tuned in to Holly Rowe. She's been a regular on ESPN since 1998, covering college football, men's and women's college basketball, softball, and just about every other sport you can think of. In 2015, Holly was diagnosed with a rare, fast-spreading form of melanoma. At first, she didn't discuss her cancer diagnosis and treatment publicly, but once she did, Holly found a cheering section of her own. Throughout her fight, Holly never stopped working and credits her passion for her work with keeping her going during such tough times. In today's conversation, Holly shares how her diagnosis shifted her perspective and focused her on the small moments of joy throughout each day. We also talk about her unique path as an ESPN reporter, navigating her big career break as a young working mom, and what she's learned behind the scenes from some of sports' biggest stars. Here's my conversation with a true game changer, Holly Rowe. All right, Holly Rowe, what a treat to have you on. Thanks for taking a minute.
So excited. Thank you for having me.
Holly, I've got to rewind the tape a little bit and start at the beginning because it's pretty unique, right? You grew up in a small town in Utah with devout Mormon parents. How did that upbringing shape, who you are today?
I think it shaped me in a lot of different ways. I mean, I grew up in a town called Bountiful, Utah, and it's exactly as beautiful and charming as that sounds. Super cute, little nestled in the mountains. Grew up with horses and, being outside, playing sports. But also my parents were very devout and very disciplined. So we got up every morning at 6 a.m. and read scriptures. And we had this crazy thing that I've just kind of remembered. I think I had forgotten it, but I just was digging through some of my father's old papers and found this cool little personal progress report. And it brought this memory back to me that every Sunday of my life, since I was about 5 years old, I would meet with my father every Sunday and do a personal progress report. And so that would mean writing down goals and checking in on how I was doing with those goals. And it was things like I had perfect attendance all through elementary school. I just imagined this little overachieving, goal-setting little girl. And, that was because of my dad and my mom, and they were high demanding people, but in a good way, like in a positive way. So I think that's kind of who I am now. I'm still goal setting, goal oriented, make my lists and check in to make sure I'm accomplishing those.
And you worked your way through college, which meant at times I know you'd go to school and then you'd pull back and you would work and then you would return to school. How did that impact, your perspective as it relates to the work you do in the world you live in now?
Well, I think I had to really earn my job. I was kind of poor trying to get through college. My parents supported me a little bit, but I had to pay my tuition. So I would stop and work for 6 months and save up enough money to pay my tuition. And so it took me a while to get through college, but it was cool. Like I had all these random, really interesting jobs. Like I worked at the Utah Republican Party. I ran George W. Bush's campaign in Utah. I worked at the Utah Republican headquarters. I was a committee secretary for the Utah State Legislature. So I would see how bills and funding got passed for state government. And I worked at a smoking cessation study. I was a janitor for a children's school. I'd wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning and go clean office buildings. So I think it made me have a good work ethic. I interacted with a lot of different random, interesting people, which I think was important. And I worked hard.
Well, and I'm sure that helped you get to where you are now, no question. I mean, I had Maria Taylor on and she talked about how everybody wants to work in sports until they work in sports, right? In other words, they don't often see the grind from the outside looking in, and there's so much hustle, so much creativity that it takes to get to where you are and do what you do. How has that upbringing helped you in the work that you do now?
Well, I think one, I appreciate it. I feel like I do work hard, but when I say I work hard, I mean, I'm getting paid to go to games. So I just feel like I should pinch myself, right? Like,
Sure.
that's ridiculous. Anyone in the world would be grateful to do that. So I am very grateful for it. I really honestly don't remember a day that I've woken up and been like, oh my gosh, I have to go to work today. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Sure.
just excited about the next challenge. So I think that it is a grind. I know people think it's glamorous, and it can be glamorous at times. And then the other 80% of the time, you are slogging around, driving through the middle of nowhere in freezing cold and terrible conditions, staying at terrible hotels. You know, it isn't all great, but the great parts are so wonderful that you're willing to do all of that.
That's fantastic. That's cool. The good suffocates the not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like childbirth. You don't even remember the labor. You just remember how much you love your baby. That's exactly how it is.
Amen, girl. Well, and going there now, right? So I know you're obviously a mother, and your son is older now. But early in your career, early on as a working mom, I know you have some fun stories about, your experiences with your son. Do you have any cool, fun working mom moments and stories, and how you juggled?
Yeah, I don't think I look back that often because a few of these memories have just come to me recently. But I got my first big break with ABC in 1995, and I was working a Utah BYU football game on the sidelines for ABC, and that was really my first big break that led to my career with ESPN. And I had a 3-month-old baby at home, and I was breastfeeding. And I just remember, here's your big break. You've been working for this your whole life, and you're breastfeeding, and you're just worried that you don't spray milk on the sideline or, get wet through your suit jacket. Or, obviously I didn't feel well. I was recovering from a C-section, and I was just trying to get home to my baby so I could feed him before I died. It was like I felt the worst I've ever felt, physically, and you get your big break. So you just kind of had to roll with it. And I just remember I had lots of wonderful help, and I would call sports information directors and say, okay, when is practice? I'll need a credential, and can you help me find a babysitter? And I mean, I will never forget the first SID I called was a man named Dave Kellogg at the Air Force Academy. And he was amazing to me and helpful to me. And Troy Garnhart was also there. And I remember pushing my son's blue and white polka dot stroller out onto the practice field, and the coach at the Air Force Academy, Fisher DeBerry, going, oh, well, what do we have here? And now that I look back on that, I realize that was probably not normal to take my baby. At that time, he probably would have been maybe 9 or 10 weeks old. And I took him on a road trip and took him to football practice. So, I mean, that's probably not normal, but I was just trying to make the best of my big break, and that's what I had to do.
So do you think inside of yourself, Holly, you were sort of not worried about what other people thought? I mean, it doesn't sound like you spent a lot of energy on that. You spent more energy on just sort of figuring out, how do I get it done? And how do I take all the goodness that exists inside of this and just step into it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think I care about what people think, and I was always worried about, am I doing a good job? Am I doing, I do think I cared about that. I just think I was naive on how things worked, and that naivete probably helped me because I wasn't so worried about it's not normal to bring your baby to practice, or, it's not normal to, have your son in his Harry Potter cape on the rental car shuttle going from your game. I was just taking it a day at a time. And so I don't think I stopped to think of what's normal. You're in survival mode, again, a young mother trying to support my child, and you're in survival mode.
Sure. You've worked hard to get to where you are. There's no doubt about it. And you're in a job that so many people want. I'm curious, how do you balance knowing your value, right? And making sure that you're one of the best in the business and should be, valued like that. How do you juggle that from the perspective of, gosh, I'm so glad to be here. I'm grateful. I love what I do, but I need to be paid for what I do because I'm good at it.
I think I'm not good at that, to be honest with you. I think I have lived in this space of gratitude throughout my whole career. I'm so grateful, and I'm so lucky to have the job that I do because I love it. That I haven't ever really stepped away and thought, what is my value? I think the first time I really even started to recognize that I had that value was when I got sick. I had cancer, and, when it kind of came out, what I was going through, there was just this outpouring of love and support that shocked me and was completely unknown to me, that how people felt across the country about me. So, you just don't go around telling people how you feel about them. So that was really special to me because you labor away for 25 years at a job that you love. And it's good to know that people loved you back. And I'll never forget this woman, a stranger, saying to me, I said, gosh, I'm just so shocked by this outpouring of love and support. And she said, why would you be shocked? You've been a guest in our living room for 20 years. And it was just the sweetest way for her to tell me, like, I might not know them, but they see me every week and they like having me in their home. And I just thought that was the sweetest possible way of saying you're invited into our home. And that's a good feeling.
Wow, that's pretty special. That's awesome. And it's true. It's interesting, Holly, because I think we're a similar age and we both watched media change and sports media change. What are some of the ways that you've experienced that and leaned into that change? Because I'm sure at times it's been challenging.
Yeah, I think it's dramatically changed how we do our jobs to have social media, for one example. So, it used to be when I started my career, we would get these big packets of newspaper articles and we would pour through these newspaper articles to find story ideas and then follow up with a coach or a player. And I could find a story and save it till my game on Saturday and nobody would know this story but me. Mm-hmm. And so now that's really hard because everything's been tweeted and seen and viral already throughout the course of a week leading up to a game. So it's really hard and challenging to come up with new, unique content that hasn't already been tweeted or consumed. And so, I'm proud of the fact that I can do that, and I'm still being creative with what I can get from kids and coaches that's new and unique. I'm learning the power of social media. Like, I can take my phone. This is an example. I did a speaking engagement at the Tallahassee Quarterback Club last night, and the coach for FAMU was there. And they're 9-1, and I just did a little interview with him on my cell phone because I never get to cover FAMU, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to showcase this season that they're having. And it's already got like 30,000 views on social media just from doing it with my cell phone in a, conference room at Florida State. And so I just think there's a lot of power and ability to be creative and accessible. So I can just take my phone and go anywhere in America and do a story. I can edit it. I can put it together myself. And that's powerful. You don't have to wait for editing and time to edit and this and that and the other. So there's some negatives to it because it is hard to find fresh for creative content, but there's some positives in that you hold the world in your hand and your cell phone and your camera.
Sure. No question. Wow. That's a great story about last night. One of the things I love that I heard you say in an interview that I think is really, really cool is some advice that you got early in your career on don't be bigger than your job. I'm sort of paraphrasing. But how has that stuck with you and why? I think that is such a powerful sort of mindset.
Well, it's some career advice that I got before I had even started work. I was an intern at CBS Sports in New York City, and there was a woman there named Leslie Visser who was kind of, I call her the OG of sideline reporters. She's in the NFL Hall of Fame. She was kind of the first woman doing this at a high level. She took me under her wing and was really nice to me, and she set me up with this guy that was a play-by-play man in New York City called Marty Glickman. And Marty Glickman is very famous. He has since passed away, but he's really one of the true legends of broadcasting. And he and I went to this cafe on the Upper West Side. I think he was maybe in his 70s at that time. And he said to me, your viewers should always remember the shot, the game, the moment, the story, but not who told it to them. It's not about you. You just need to tell a good story and let the viewers enjoy that on their own and not make it about you. And I just always loved that. I think we are living in a time now, and I think I'm trying to get better at this, where you are self-promoting a little bit. I was having a conversation with Doris Burke and Beth Mowens about how we've never really self-promoted ourselves. And I think in this day and age, that's hurt us because we've been really good, high-level quality work for many years, but we're not the mainstream people necessarily because we're not the ones putting ourselves out there. And so we had this conversation of you do have to do some self-promotion of like, hey, I'm over here doing a good job here. Pay attention. So it's kind of conflicting ideas of like, I want to tell a good story and not have the story know who told it. But at the same time, you have to stay relevant in the marketplace and it has to be competitive and people need to want to hire you because you are telling these good stories. So there's a kind of a finer balance now in our careers, I would say.
And Holly, do you sort of attack that by, I mean, knowing you a little bit, it feels like you attack that by delivering content that maybe is about you, but it's stuff that lifts other people up. That's about you, but it helps other people do what they do maybe better, and it brings them joy, and it's a story that lifts them up. I mean, is that how you lean into that? Because it is awkward and strange in the world that we're in today with this.
Yeah. I think where I'm living, the space I'm living in right now is, I think I'm the world's most curious person. And I feel like I just like to share things like, oh my gosh, I discovered this cool story. Let me share it with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's not necessarily about me, but it's kind of showcasing, gosh, I discovered this, or I found this, and I would love to share it with you. And I feel like that's kind of a healthy, joyful place to live in. And I do think that I'm definitely different in my work now after going through cancer, being in a really dark, scary place where I wasn't sure if I was going to live or not. And now I'm just all about the joy. If I find a happy, good story, I just have to share it with the world, because I want every single day to experience some joy and happiness. And I want that for all of us, because we just kind of grind along, plugging along sometimes in life, instead of every single day stopping and leaning into these joyful moments. So that's what I want to share right now in my career.
And I love it. And I know you have a joy journal, which is super cool. Can you share a little bit about how you use that and how that has impacted your life with our listeners?
Yeah. So I was going through, when I'm going through my cancer treatments, and I really wasn't feeling well, and every day is a struggle. Like, I can barely get out of bed today, or I've lost all my hair today and I'm upset about this, it's easy to go to a dark, depressed place when you're dealing with cancer every day. And so I just started deciding that I was going to focus in on my little, small, joyful moments each day instead of the scary parts. And so I started just keeping track of, today I felt joyful when. And one of the moments where it started was, I was in Madison Square Garden at a WNBA game, and this little public school choir, like PS 84, from, Harlem, came and sang the national anthem. And I just remember sitting there weeping, like, these kids are beautiful. And in this moment right now, I am happy and joyful. And so I wrote it down. And I just started kind of documenting each day what my joyful moment was, and letting it wash over me and feel it and be like, oh, this makes me so happy. And that just kind of grew. And so then I was living more in those joyful moments instead of the scary moments, the worrisome moments. So, I'll give you an example. This happened to me last night. I'm not making this story up. So I was driving through Tallahassee. This nice man, Hugh Tomlinson, was driving me home from speaking at an event, and we could see a parking garage in Tallahassee, Florida, filled with kids dancing. And these are like college-age kids in a full-out dance competition rehearsal, like probably 50 to 60 kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So we pulled into the garage, got out, and asked if we could watch. And it turned out it was two dance groups from FAMU, and they were choreographing and rehearsing. And we sat there for 30 minutes and watched young college kids dance in a parking garage.
That's awesome.
And it was just like the highlight of my night. And I was like, that was so cool. I felt like I just stumbled on a live movie scene for Step Up, or, one of the great dance movies. And these kids were so good and so talented and so athletic. And, I would never stop like that before, or I would just be like, oh, that was interesting. But I'm like, no, I am going to stop and investigate these cool moments in life, because that's where life is in the cool moments, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, no question. And how cool, we live in this busy world where people go from one thing to the next so quickly and sort of react to their calendars. But you have learned through what you've gone through to pause and say, I'm just going to get out and experience this, and hit pause on life. Do you do that a lot? It's so cool.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I'm traveling extensively for my job every week. And so I'm trying to really, hey, I'm here in Florida this day. I'm going to go visit the Florida State football team and get to know them, because I'll have their events in 2 months. Or I'm going to go walk on the beach this morning, or I'm going to go walk in Central Park today because I'm in New York. Like, I just want to, and this is not planned, it's not organized, it's not, anything other than noticing what's around me and absorbing it and enjoying it and living in it.
Holly, I want to rewind the tape for a second. And you talked about your cancer. And so first of all, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Okay.
Just had a good CAT scan.
Awesome.
I think 10 days ago that was showing that I am really stable, and I'm done with treatment for now. So I just have to kind of do scans every 3 months. And then if those stay healthy, then you kind of go out to every 6 months, and then you go out to every year. So I'm just kind of trying to get into that remission phase down the road, and I'm doing great. I feel great.
Well, and I've heard you talk about, the fear that comes with this diagnosis, and you've had to deal with it so publicly, something that's so personal. How have you been able to, and maybe this is something that can help our listeners, take fear and you've shifted it to joy? I mean, you've shifted what is so fearful and scary to being and choosing joy, which is so powerful. How have you done that, and how do you do that every day with clearly intentionality?
Yeah, I think that, I wish I could sound like some wise sage guru or something, but I'm not. I'm just a dumb girl from Bountiful, Utah. That
I don't know about that part, girl.
Something really good. I remember I woke up from a dream. This was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, and things were not necessarily going well. I had inoperable tumors in my lung, and my doctor had said to me, you need to start thinking about how you're spending your time, which I think it's a nice way of saying we're not sure how much time you have left. Because I was on treatment and they're hoping that you react to the treatment, but they don't know. So I remember waking up from a dream where I dreamt that I died, and I sat up in bed and I couldn't breathe. I was like, and I was just so freaked out, and I just thought, I can't keep worrying about dying or else I'm not living. And I just decided that was not going to be how I approached every day. I threw myself into work, really, because I'm happy at work. I'm happy when I'm at a game focused on other people. And it was WNBA season at that time. And I thought, if I can just get to a game and go see these women play that motivate me and inspire me. And I remember going to an LA Sparks game, and it was Candace Parker and Neko Gumake. And they were so nice to me because at that time I was bald and I was wearing a wig. And Candace Parker said, "You're beautiful. Don't wear the wig. You do not need the wig." And that was their breast health awareness game. And so that night, I finally found the courage to go on national TV without my wig. And I just started to kind of lean into this. You know what? It's happening. I can't control what's happening to my body, but I can control how I'm living and experiencing life. So I just started trying to have fun, think about my joyful moments, and not let the cancer control you. It controls you. Appointment to appointment, scan to scan, test to test. It is consuming. And if you're not finding some pieces of joy and happiness outside of that cancer consumption, it's hard.
Mm-hmm. You're a strong woman, no question about it. But I am sure, as a mother of your son who you love so much, there's moments, I'm sure, when you've been vulnerable or had to ask for help, which for strong women can be hard. How have you done that? How have you sort of juggled that?
It's hard. I don't think I've been really great at that, asking for help, but I think that when you're diagnosed with cancer, all of the people around you that love you feel helpless because they can't fight it for you and they can't do anything but help you. And so I think that it's almost an act of kindness for those around you to ask them to help you. Do you know what I'm saying? To give them permission to help you. It's almost like, yes, I need help, but I can handle everything by myself. But I'm gonna ask for help because it's gonna help you feel better about what's happening to us. So yeah, my son had an interesting moment where he moved to New York to go through this acting program, and he said to me recently, I think I was just running away. I just didn't want to see you going through cancer, and I just think I was running away because I was so terrified. And that was a really sweet admission for him because, of course I did wonder, wow, you're moving away at a time that I need you the most. But I didn't want him to have to suffer through my cancer with me, if that makes sense. So I did support him moving across the country. And then when things got really bad and it looked like I wasn't maybe going to make it, I did move to New York to be closer to him. And we're sharing an apartment on the Upper West Side. And it's hilarious to be roommates with your 24-year-old son. But, like we would navigate that together. And I would be like, hey, I just want to be closer to you because I don't know how this is going to go. And I'd like to spend my time with you. And when I'm home, I'd like to be by you. And he's like, well, let's do it. So part of it's just negotiating and navigating like, hey, I'm feeling scared or I'm feeling like I don't know how this is going to turn out. Let's maximize our time together.
So you're now living with your son in New York. Is that still the case?
Yes.
That's outstanding. That's a blast. Give me a good mother-son moment there. That's got to be interesting. Is he getting after it in Manhattan? And
yeah,
you're in and out.
Park, Upper West Side.
Super cool.
We had to take the subway. I pay for all his groceries. I feel like it's a great win-win situation.
That's cool. So I want to shift a little bit. You've interviewed obviously some of the best athletes and coaches in the world. And I am sure both on and off the record, you've had some incredible sort of pieces of wisdom that have stood out to you and you've learned along the way from these peak performers. What are some cool maybe stories or experiences or thoughts that you've soaked in from these superstars?
Gosh, it's a great question. There's so many. Let me think of some of my best examples. I think a lesson that I had very early in my career, and he will never know this because I don't really know him, but when I was a very young reporter, I was obsessed. So even when I was in college, I was obsessed with the Chicago Bulls. And I was a huge Bulls fan and loved Michael Jordan. And to the point where my whole name is Holly Rowe. I do not have a middle name. So when I graduated from college, the Chicago Bulls had just beaten Detroit for the first time in the Eastern Conference Finals to get to the NBA Finals for the first time. And they had tried time and time again to get past the bad boys of Detroit, and they never could. But this was the first time they beat them to get to the NBA Finals, and it was the week I was going through my college graduation. And so as I crossed the stage at the University of Utah, they have you fill out a card that the PA guy can announce. And now, Holly Rowe. And so I filled out my PA card, and I graduated from the University of Utah as Holly Bowles Rowe, to honor the Chicago Bulls.
Good stuff.
So fast forward, and I get an opportunity to interview Michael Jordan. And I had read everything, and I had read this great biography by a writer, Sam Summitt, with Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan talked about how he hated it when the media would just come up to him and stick a microphone in his face, or stick a little recorder in his face, or just start asking questions, and that they didn't treat him like a human being, and that they just treated him like a commodity, and that he was expected to answer these questions. And I don't know why, but for some reason that just resonated with me, and I think has changed my entire career with how I treat athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's paid off in the way that I think I built good relationships with athletes where I treat them as a human being first, and I think that matters. I think I have been able to elicit good responses, get good interviews, have great interactions with people. And a lot of it goes back to what I had read from Michael Jordan about his frustration with how he was treated.
That is amazing. What about, anything from a coach that really stands out to you from some of your conversations with some of the best, college coaches really in the world?
I've gotten pieces from all the great coaches, but some of my favorite, obviously, Pat Summitt was probably the coach I was the most obsessed with as a human being, because I was a fan of hers, again, as a young person growing up. And she was really the first woman I saw on TV coaching anything. And she was the first woman I saw be competitive and fierce on television, but also be, pretty and have a suit on and look feminine. And just this idea of being able to be competitive and fierce and feminine, that just was my whole life, because I grew up as a tomboy, competitive person. And so it's kind of frowned upon, and you were supposed to be more ladylike or whatever. And here was Pat Summitt that was both, that was everything. And she was also successful. So I got really obsessed with Pat Summitt. I later got to be friends with her. And I think she taught me, one, to treat people well. She was the most successful coach in the country at that time. And she was the most accessible.
Wow.
Some coaches are really tight. They won't let you in the locker room. They won't let you in their huddles. They keep everything close. Pat Summitt said to me, hey, do you want to come in to the locker room at halftime and listen to the speech? Hey, do you want to come into our film session and listen to the film session? Like, she was so inclusive and open and confident. I mean, that comes from being so secure with yourself.
I was just going to say that, Holly. I agree with you, right? They know what they do, it, and they're confident in it. That's cool.
Yeah, and she had nothing to hide. And I just remember thinking, here this woman is at the height of her game, and she's an open book. How beautiful. Geno Auriemma is another coach that I have really loved getting to know and cover. I mean, maybe the best tactician and the best championship caliber coach we've ever seen. And his attention to detail, and he can see what you need. Like, he would know immediately what button he would need to push for me or for you to get us to perform better. He can assess quickly. He can study a person's personality. He can get the very best out of you. He knows what, when, and how with every athlete that he interacts with, and he's brilliant at that.
If you had to boil it down to one or two, maybe three things that you think these elite, the top, the Pat Summits, right, the Genos, the Jordans have in common, what do you think those traits are?
I think the number one trait is competitive. And that is something that, for whatever reason in our country, we are backpedaling on, and we've made it seem bad to be competitive. I'll never forget coaching my son's youth soccer game where they told me we didn't keep score, and my head nearly exploding when he was 5 years old. We don't keep score, then what are we even doing out here?
Right.
So I think that every great person I know is insatiably competitive. I also think that every great person I know is interested in other people. They are not, you have to be somewhat self-absorbed, but I think that they are more interested in the success of others. Like, coaches have to care about other people and getting the best out of other people. So I would say that. And then I would say they have to be top-level communicators. So every great coach in America, like I just sat in on a Mike Krzyzewski practice, and I literally got prickles up the back of my neck because I thought, I've just never heard anyone explain this concept so easily to digest. Like, if I played for Mike Krzyzewski, I would exactly know how to run this back cut because he has just explained it so beautifully. Bill Self from Kansas is another one that I think is an excellent explainer. Like, his guys know exactly what to do because he's able to communicate it at the highest level. So competitive, communicator, caring. I'm just going to summarize it into those 3 C's. Those are my 3 C's I just made up.
That's good stuff. I like it. And Holly, I would argue that you have a whole lot of those traits too, right? I mean, you get in front of people that are hard to get in front of, and you very gently, as you just indicated, put a microphone and ask oftentimes maybe tough questions. How have you established trust with people that don't trust generally very easily?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not exactly sure if I have a good answer for that, other than I think I am myself at all times. I don't think I'm phony. I think that coaches and people in those kinds of positions can spot phony, self-absorbed people immediately. So I think you have to come with a very genuine spirit of, help me tell the world about you, and let's do it in a positive way. I think you've got to be positive. I've got to think that you've got to be genuine. And then you will have times where stuff goes wrong. We just had a situation covering the WNBA where some things happened that were very negative for a team and an athlete. And when things go wrong, will they share and talk to you and trust you with information? And, you have to earn that. I think that's earned over time with people.
Mm-hmm. Over time and consistency. And because you hear a whole lot of stuff inside of practices and moments, and then you're inside of another locker room of their biggest competitor, you've got to be able to filter that information in an authentic way, in an honest way.
Right. And you have to be evolved. I mean, you are given access that no one else gets in these private moments, and you absolutely have to protect it with your life. I've learned to be very protective of not putting things in an email that could be forwarded inadvertently or forwarded to the wrong people, or not putting things in text or things that could be shared. I'm really, really careful of, like, if I have to tell my producer, hey, so-and-so's out and they're not playing and we didn't expect that, I will call them on the phone. So there's no other trace of this communication that could, you have to really be mindful about the information so that coaches do trust you.
Holly, your schedule's demanding. You go hard. I mean, you cover so much, for ESPN, obviously. How do you manage your energy? How do you manage your energy and avoid burnout, exhaustion, and keep going? Because when the light turns on, right, you got to be ready to go.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think I'm like everybody. I have ebbs and flows in energy. One thing I am proud of about myself is I'm really feeling great now. And now the better I feel coming out of my cancer treatment, I realized that I did not feel well and I did not miss work. I kept going. I worked through 4 straight years of cancer treatment. And I'm proud of that now that I look back at it, because now I realize how bad I really felt. But I do think that my energy comes from the passion I have for the game. So like I might be tired, but I'm going to wake up and get on this flight at 6 a.m. because I've got to get to practice, and I'm excited about that. I think your energy comes from enthusiasm and excitement. Obviously, there's days I crash. I might have laid on the couch all day Sunday and binge watched Modern Love, that new wonderful series that I was weeping over. Like I definitely have down times and lay on the couch times like any normal human being. But I think the passion I have and the enthusiasm I have for my job, that overrides everything.
In the work that you've done, right, you've had to say yes a lot, right? To get to where you are, you have to say yes to get there. And then you get to a place where maybe you have to say no to manage your energy and to maybe avoid burnout. How have you learned to shift that probably in your life and say no at times so that you can show up to what matters most to maybe you, to your family, to your values, et cetera?
Okay, so I'm going to just be honest, and that is
All
a
right.
skill I have not learned yet.
Okay.
So I have not learned how to say no to anyone. That's probably an issue that I have. People keep saying that. They're like, why are you working gymnastics? Or why are you still working volleyball? Or, I think I'm one of the few journalists that have been prominent at a national level that still works all the women's sports I do. I see a ton of people that start out covering women's sports, and then they theoretically elevate to other sports. And I've always viewed it like, I want to be covering the women's sports. I am elevated here in this position because I'm covering women's sports. So I don't want to let any of these sports go because they matter to me. And these women are valued by me, and I'm lucky to be covering them. And so I don't say no to things because I want to keep covering the sports that I love and I value.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And we need women covering these incredible women. So thank you. That's awesome. So, Holly, we end with rapid fire. So I want to fire off some quick questions to you, and you just fire back what comes up. You ready?
Yes.
One word to describe yourself.
Fun.
One word others would use to describe you.
Bossy. People think that's a negative connotation. It is not a negative. I look at it as a positive. They may be like, oh my gosh, how we made us do this, but we had a great time doing it, so it's okay.
Would you also define that as a leader?
Yes.
Right.
I think women can be bossy, and it can be a positive leadership role, and I do think I'm a leader.
Yeah, good. Last show you binge watched. Well, you just told me.
Modern Love. It is
there we
so
go.
Good. Tina Fey, Netflix. It was amazing. Or no, it was on Apple TV, I think. I can't remember.
One thing on your bucket list.
Oh my gosh, one thing on my bucket list. I've done so many things on my bucket list. I've got to start coming up with new ones right now. Tokyo 2020 Olympics, to go support softball and sit in the stands as softball returns to the Olympics.
Oh, that's cool. Good for you. A person you want to interview that you haven't yet?
President Obama.
Awesome. Advice you would give your younger self?
Advice I would give my younger self is stop worrying about looking like everyone else. I've never been the tall, thin, cute blonde. I am a short, chubby, cute little round woman, and all of a sudden my figure is in vogue because all the Kardashians. So I'm built like a Kardashian, but it wasn't that in style 20 years ago. So I would just embrace, you're never going to fit that mold. Be who you are. Be the best version of yourself. Work out, do the best you can, but stop trying to be this impossible ideal and be confident in what you are.
Well, that's good stuff. So the show's called Game Changer. So one last question. What game changer, who's a game changer that inspires you and why?
Well, I would think Pat Summitt would be my game changer. Mm-hmm. And she, as I mentioned, she was the first woman that I saw on TV that made it seem okay to be competitive. I don't know why, but I was recently speaking with a team, and I went around the entire team and said, give me a trait about yourself. and not one kid said competitive. And I was mortified. And I just thought, why aren't we teaching our young people, in particularly our young women, that it's okay to be competitive? I will race you to the gate at the airport because I want the best carry-on space.
Sure.
I mean, I'm trying to get to the best produce. I love being competitive, and I'm never going to apologize for it. And I want us to teach people that's okay. You can be competitive. You can be kind and competitive. And Pat Summitt was the person that changed that game for me because she taught me that's okay. You can be kind and elegant and beautiful and feminine and competitive as hell.
That's good stuff. Well, I know. Well, we might want to start with this whole youth sports issue with everybody gets a trophy program.
Oh,
yeah, I'm with you. I'm sure we feel the same way about that.
Yeah, I think you have to earn trophies. Everything in life is earned. I don't care what anyone says. You have to earn things, and that's okay.
Yeah, well, you, Holly, have, and thank you for fighting this cancer. The world needs you. We need women like you in the world. So thanks for the work that you do and for just who you are, for being you. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.